Yes, yes. So we are excited to have you all here with us for another episode of the Powerful Conversations with Powerhouse Women Series. We are so excited about the work that we're doing as a part of the Love Letters to My Girls Anthology project. If you don't know who I am Dr. Sharita Weatherspoon, and I am the, producer, compiler of the Love Letters to My Girls Anthology project, where we brought over 100 Black women and girls together to write letters to inspire, uplift, motivate, and empower our sisters. And we're excited about the upcoming book release. I want you to mark your calendars for November 19th through the 21st, when we will be having our live virtual event. The theme is the power of you, and you'll get more details about that. But we're just excited about everything that we're doing, about the book, about the lives that we're going to be able to impact through this work. And we're excited to have this conversation series as a part of that project. What we're doing is bringing together small groups of our authors to talk about topics that are relevant and important to Black women. And tonight will be no different. Tonight, we're talking about surrounded in white spaces, how to move from surviving to thriving. And tonight, I have with me Joy Pittman, who is a human resource expert and consultant. She is going to be facilitating or hosting this conversation tonight. And it's going to be good. I mean, I had a great conversation with Joy a couple of weeks ago. I think you are going to enjoy her. And then, of course, our authors, some of them you have met previously through some other things that we've done with the project, various interviews and podcast interviews, and then the Meet the Authors Live. So these are powerful powerhouse women, which is part of the reason why we call the conversation series what we have. And I'm just excited for you to hear from them, not only about their experiences, but also strategies that they've used, tips that they can give you. And I want you to walk away with not just having been part of a good conversation, but with information that you can use to help you in your own experience, in this case in the workplace as a Black woman. So I'm going to ask Joy to tell us a little bit about herself, and then the authors will introduce themselves, and we'll jump right into the conversation.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Joy Pittman. Thank you, Dr. Weatherspoon, for having me on. I'm really excited. So I am a 15-year HR veteran. I'm currently the founder of JVP Legacy. And so in that, my business, we support Black female entrepreneurs who are CEOs in their businesses, 6, 7, 8-figure businesses, helping them grow and scale through their teams. And so I've sat in the HR space, both in corporate, in a public sector, private sector, and now I get to help Black women build the teams that can help build their businesses and move them forward in HR capacity. And so I'm excited to be here. Enough about me, and we're going to get to hearing about our amazing panelists today. So if we can start with Raquel and then go to Heather, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Rochelle Byers-Sargent, and no worries, Raquel sounds so much more elegant. But I work in television on the technology side. I've been in the business for about 22 years now. And the core of what I do is re-engineering business processes and managing change in the organization.
Perfect. Thank you, Rochelle. Heather?
Good evening, everyone. I am Heather Horton. I currently reside in Washington, D.C., and I am the founder of the H Squared Group, where I empower Black women to stop masking their emotions and feelings so they can turn that pain into power through grief coaching, grief recovery education, and support.
Well, this is going to be good. That's amazing. Savannah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Savannah Shepard. I'm 18 years old. I'm currently at Swarthmore College, and I'm the founder of the Delaware Social Justice Remembrance Coalition, and we work to recognize and acknowledge victims of lynching and other issues of racial terror to help move forward in the state of Delaware and around the country.
Thank you so much, Savannah. And last but not least, Mary, if you can tell us about you.
You're muted, Mary. There we go.
All right. Hi, I'm Mary Fernandez, and I am a women's business and personal development coach. I've been doing that almost all my life. It was born years ago from growing up being a community activist and serving from the leadership team in the city to the community leaders. And finally, I wanted to reach out to the women that I was working with to help them break free from shyness and walk in the authority they were born with.
Awesome.
Amazing. So we are a group of empowered women, empowering women. I'm excited about this, and I want to not belabor the time at all and jump into our first question, which is really kind of unpacking our theme, moving from surviving to thriving. So what does it mean for each of you? And I actually would like each of you to take a moment to answer this. What does thriving mean? I think we understand survival. I think many of us have had to do it, but what does it mean, or what does it feel like for you to thrive? And we'll start off again with Rochelle.
So I think thriving professionally is really being true to yourself. And essentially your passions, and to be true to your experiences, and knowing that your experiences have value, and to impart those experiences to those around you. I think that's really thriving whenever you have the experiences under your belt, and you can really begin to share those and live them out and be proud of them, you know, even the bad ones. So I think that's thriving.
Okay. Mary?
Okay, Mary, all right. I believe thriving to me is more of a personal power, a personal expression of being comfortable in your own skin, no matter what room or table you're sitting at. It's being so comfortable that you're present in the moment so that you can receive and you can also impart.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for that, Mary. Heather?
I would agree with Rochelle and Mary, but I'd also say that you're thriving when you're using your voice and you're communicating effectively, where you're understood, your values are out front, and as Mary said, you're present. You're in the present moment. You're listening and making sure that you're getting what you need to be your best. And I think a lot of times we wear masks and we don't do that, but we've got to advocate for ourselves no matter what, because that's the only way that we can thrive. Otherwise, we're just surviving.
So we've gotten from Rochelle, and I didn't forget you, Savannah. So we've gotten that we're really going to be able to kind of be ourselves and engage. We have, Mary said, listen, we just got to be able to show up and feel empowered. And then Heather added to that with also adding that version of ourselves that we get to kind of engage and sit in. Savannah, how do you, what does thriving feel like to you? What does that mean to you?
I would agree with all of those points. And I think for me, it's especially just being comfortable with who I am, and being able to spread, tell my story, and not be ashamed of any aspect of it, but to be proud of it and feel like I can move forward and achieve anything that I would like to achieve, and not feel like I'm holding myself back by not sharing who I am.
Okay, so having set those baselines, right, of what it means to each of you to thrive, let's talk about our actual experience, right, in the workplace. Savannah, also in school, in the workplace. What has that been like, and how has it either aligned with or totally been totally distant from what it is of your definition of thriving? And if we can go back to Savannah and start with Savannah.
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it was learning how to know that it's never going to go away, and learning how to deal with it within myself, being proud to speak about how I'm feeling and not shy away from having the difficult conversations, and making sure that others feel like they can have those difficult conversations to move past some of the harsh experiences that they're going through. And in school, it's hard because you want to fit in with your peers and you want to go along with what things are going for everyone else. But it's important to pave your own way and let people know that you're one of them, and in the sense that you're all peers, but you're different, and your differences should be celebrated.
Perfect. Rochelle, if you can tell us about, take maybe 60 seconds, if 60 seconds, right? So kind of talk about your experience in the workplace as it relates to your definition of thriving. Have you been able to experience that? Or has it been very different? Have you had to create that lane for yourself? If you could share a bit of that experience.
Sure. I think you have to, I've learned to compartmentalize, right? And not to take things personally, right? Because that, when you begin to take things as a personal attack, then I think it blocks your ability to thrive. And so I would say I have learned my power at work by having a network outside of work. People to rely on, to talk through issues, and really to get my reactions out so that I can respond when I'm at work and not react while I'm at work.
I'm going to ask you the same question, Heather.
I would echo what Rochelle said, but I also want to point out that we have personal lives and we bring our personal lives to work with us. So we've got to be thriving in our personal lives in order to manifest who we really are in the workplace. Yeah, I can't stress that enough, because for me, I worked in white spaces for almost 2 decades. And when I left, what I didn't realize is I went in there, I found my champions, I got the things done that I wanted to get done, but it was my personal life that was holding me back.
Oh.
Sure. And I want to, if I can unpack, and I don't want to pick on anyone's answer, but, as we're thinking about, and I listened to Rochelle's answer, I keep wanting to call you Raquel, but as I listen to Rochelle's answer, the thought about what it means to have to compartmentalize. Like I listened to Rochelle's answer and heard a lot of how, and again, correct me if I'm adding a layer to something you did not say, but what I felt like I heard was a lot of packing it up and figuring out how to navigate the workspace, because the workspace didn't necessarily make room for you to thrive based on what it is to kind of be that authentic self, being able to be who you are. So what do we do? And we can, I don't want it to be as Q&A, but also I'm trying to keep us from cutting each other out on Zoom. It gets tricky. So if I call on you, I'm not, raise your hand if you have something good that you want to jump in, but just want to keep some order. But as we're thinking about that, what does that then feel like to have to, as the person, as the employee, right? We know what these statements are. We want our employees to feel valued. I, as an HR person, had to make those statements about the value of the employee. So what does it feel like as the person in the organization to have to navigate the organization that way? How does that really feel? Though we know how to do it, is that part of the surviving? And what does that really feel like? And I'll pivot it back to Rochelle because I'm jumping on her response. What does that feel like?
I think in a way it might be a little bit of surviving, but I also believe as Black women, sometimes what we're feeling in the moment is truth for us. And I have learned the power of taking a beat, not saying what's on my mind in the moment, right? But just kind of taking a beat. I've learned to, what I call, sleep on it. Let me just sleep on it for a while. Because I want to be sure that whenever I'm responding, and I had a great executive coach one time tell me, you want people to focus on what you're saying, not how you're saying it. And as Black women, we have some tone, right? And we can say things, right? And in a very, cutting way. And that is true for me. And so I've really had to understand that, truthfully, while that may work in my community, in my household, it's a different circumstance in the workplace. And it's important that people do not miss what you're saying because they're so tied up in how you're saying things. But then also, I think I've learned, I think it was Heather who mentioned the power of grieving has been very important in my career because, it's true. There are times you're overlooked. There are times where, you have an idea and that idea is taken from you and somebody else gets the credit. I mean, there's real unfairness in the workplace, and it is important that you allow yourself to grieve its loss. And that's something I've learned in my adult life, that loss is not just at a funeral. You have loss throughout your life and you have to let yourself grieve. So that has really helped me as well.
Very good. Very good.
Did anyone have anything that they also wanted to weigh in on that? Because I think that to me is kind of a heavy moment, that moment of understanding, in our own humanity, right? That loss, the promotion that we didn't get. And, no matter how we try to contextualize it, right? Does it feel good? Or having to navigate in areas where we have to manage everyone else's feelings and thoughts and expectations while we're going through things. Does anyone else have something to lend, right, to that actual part of the conversation? Because I don't want to box anyone's voice out.
Well, I would go back to, we are people and we bring our stuff from home to work. So we've got to grieve the things that happen to us on a daily basis, not just the things that happen to us at work. And what we don't realize a lot of times, or we don't even want to acknowledge, is that any loss or any change in anything that is familiar to us is grief. And we've got to grieve it, as Rochelle said. I'm just ecstatic that you even raised that, because it's something that we ignore, we don't want to acknowledge, we avoid. We live in a grief avoidance society. The people around us don't even want to accept it. So it is something that you've got to intentionally do if you want to thrive.
So true.
Yeah. I want to pivot to Savannah because I think, and I'm assuming that her experience may be a little different than ours as a student and just the advocacy. How do you feel about what you've heard and just your thoughts around this idea around thriving versus surviving?
Yeah, I think for, a large part of my life so far, I'm 18. So like most of my life, I was just like surviving. I grew up in predominantly white places and spaces. And so for me, it was constantly wanting to be like them and not wanting to really touch into like my Blackness really. And just recently, since I was 15, is when I got comfortable with it. So it was coming into that like thriving space for me has been, amazing. I love being able to be who I am. And it's like that inner feeling of being able to be happy and being comfortable with who I am. And I think that's like the most important part. Like you can be happy with everyone on the outside, but are you really happy on the inside? And that for me, seeing that within myself has been a completely different like experience, and it's amazing. But there's still obviously times when people will try and bring you down and take you away from that space of thriving. But I think if you find it within yourself and you have something that's driving, if you have a passion that's pushing you to stay thriving, then it's easy to kind of block those things out. But it can still be difficult because words are strong, and what people can say can really affect the way that you view yourself and view your spaces. But it's just important to stay strong in your beliefs and continue to push for what you think and believe to be right.
Yeah, and I really, really love that. And I love that you found that at 15. I think I was way into my adulthood when I was able to tap into that. So I'm excited that you found that at 15 and are living in that. I want to add on to that, right, and build into that. And thinking about those moments, Savannah just identified for us that she found it at 15. Do any of us or any of you want to share the moment? And I'm going to pick on Mary, but if anyone else also wants to engage, the moment where you had that, we all talked about in our thriving, that ability to be ourselves, right? And whether that meant learning how to adapt in the workspace, but also having that free space away from it to kind of be who we are. If it was owning that power in the workspace, if it was pivoting off and starting something where we got to empower others. Was there a moment for each of you ladies where it was like, this has to happen, this work has to change, I had this shift? And if you could talk to us a little bit about that moment, it would be amazing.
I wanted to share that. I remember that moment. I was in my college years, and I decided that Shy had to go. Shy was like a prison, not speaking up and owning my air in the room. Instead of shrinking, it was just like I put my hands out into the world and said, that is it. And in my faith, I went to my dad's church because they truly worship the Lord. He was an engineer, and in the school over at the college, in that same emotion, I said to myself, I am going to participate in everything I possibly can that forces me to volunteer and use my voice. And then working on an engineering, electronic technology degree, which is where my career led me, I was always in the room with mostly men. And they always would act as if it was a novelty that I was in the room. And second, if I answered a question or knew something, it was like amazing. And that began to strengthen my skin, my personality. I really began to straighten up my back because I said, I own this space. I belong here. And I'm going to listen to that professor and get everything I need. And then you shift into the job environment and you're constantly under attack with that same spirit of being a novelty. In fact, I was the only electronic technician female on the second floor where the engineers were, and it was a novelty. And I became so strong in myself that it was like feeling like I was 50 feet tall when I walked down the hall in the factory, because all eyes that were on me were not friendly. So if I went from where I was to the lunchroom, it was not a friendly place. But I owned that space because I wanted what I wanted for my family, and that was a better life. And the family was my source of strength, because when I left work, boundaries went up. I was home. I was happy. I was with my children and my husband. And then armor back on for the next day. So from surviving to thriving was that emotional shift.
And I really love the Own the Space. I really love even how you contextualize what could have made many people shrink. I probably would have shrank a little bit at that time, but how that kind of empowered you to stand up taller, right, and show up a little differently. I really love that. Heather, I'm going to pick on you again. Can you share a little bit about that transitional moment for you?
Interestingly enough, I think the transitional moment for me was when I left the white spaces, because I grew up in Louisiana. I grew up knowing that people didn't want me to be good at anything. People didn't want to give me anything. And I had to go in there and just take what I came to get. I mean, my parents instilled in me from the beginning, I could do whatever I wanted to do. And that's how I approached everything, school, anything. That's how I approached it. So I went into the white spaces full force, knowing that I wasn't going to just be handed things. But I think in that I lost who I was because I was wearing a mask most days. I was just conforming. And it got to the point where I started to feel like I was physically ill when I went to work. And I just knew that that was not the space for me. But again, it wasn't until I left the white space and actually took opportunity to reflect and breathe and figure out who I was and what I really wanted. It wasn't until then that I actually started to thrive. And that's why I started my business, so that I can empower women to remove these masks now, while they want to stay in the workspace and be who they are, because you can be who you are. I just didn't know that when I was in that space.
Yeah, I relate a lot to that. That's why I look back and I think about Mary and Savannah's story and just say, I wish I would have been able to like make that transition in my mind then, but mine was much similar to yours, Heather, in that, you know, once I left and started actually building my business and started thinking about what the narrative would be around these women I would be supporting, I think it was literally a moment. I remember crying at the moment where I actually wrote down my mission statement and felt strong enough to write Black women, and not put diverse leaders or, people of color, but to literally say, I want to help Black women do this in their businesses. And I remember saying it out loud the first time and like ball crying. Like it was, I mean, it felt great. When I look back at it now, I was like, why was that so emotional? But I know it was. I had never been in a space before in my life where I felt like I could thrive and also say that I'm here for Black women. That saying that would not just be the death of me, but that would actually be something that would actually catapult me in my career. I did not forget you, Rochelle. I just wanted to throw that in there before we move too far. Do you mind sharing with us that moment for you?
I'm trying to think, I feel like in many ways, I've certainly had ups and downs in my career, but when I really look at the totality of my career, I see really the hand of God in my career, and people that were placed along the path that even if I was denied in one area, my name continued to be brought up before great men. And I saw that, the folks who did not want me to succeed became my footstool. And I think it's important to reflect. It's important to live in the moment and be present, but it's also important to reflect, and so that you can see how the hand of God did show up in your life. It's one of those things, as you get older, you realize that that presence of God comes in ways that you wouldn't have expected, right? And how you would have authored it, but it's there. And I think because of that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had, tremendous battles at work, and crying nights and seasons, just seasons of what is this? But throughout all of that, there was always some type of triumph that came about that was not brought, that could not have possibly been brought about by just me, right? And so I have leaned on my faith quite a bit, and even the letter that I wrote to my girls in this book, I talk about how it's so important to realize that you were put on this earth to bring about greatness, to bring about change, and the whole earth is waiting on you. And I think whenever you really begin to tap into that and you see that I am the change, I am the blessing, I am the prize, right? It helps you to approach life very differently, that some decisions you make in the business world, it won't make sense to all, but you realize, that you're operating on a different tier of faith and belief.
Yes.
And so I want to, if I can just take a little liberty, and I want to ask this question because I hear the theme of faith has come up a lot, right, in some of the responses and the answers. How do we as Black women, right, balance, and slightly in the way and leaning in the way that Rochelle has mentioned, balance our faith and understanding and belief that God is working out a bigger plan, and the moment that these things are happening to us where they really feel unjust, right, and unfair? How do we, or how, and anyone can kind of jump in on here. I don't want to pick on anyone because this is a faith question. I don't want to pick on anyone or force them to answer, but how have you, for lack of a better word, reconciled, right, in those moments, what that difference is, and decided where this is part of my faith walk, or this is a moment where I need to stand up for myself and say something? How do you reconcile and navigate those moments? And I'll open it to whoever wants to jump in and share on that one.
I'd love to share about that, because when I'm invited or I'm doing a workshop or a program, I tell them I bring 100% me, and I'm a woman of faith, and therefore my references will be to that foundation. And when it comes to shocking moments where I knew God was with me, I would, in my mind, hold tight to be having a conversation with him. Okay, God, this is yours. You have to handle this. And you can be in a terrible moment of hurt and drama, but you calm yourself inside and you say, okay, God, how we're going to get out of here and how we're going to handle this.
Okay.
And with that trust, present in the moment and responding to the individuals. In fact, when I was a substitute teacher, the difficult children would say, "Are you a preacher?" Because I treated them with respect. And that was the foundation. If you're going to be in my space, I want to honor you and I expect you to honor me. If not, there are consequences.
Does anyone else want to share about that?
I would say I have just an arsenal of scripture that I quote all the time, things I've learned from childhood. And so they're habit. So by the time something happens, it just comes out. And one of those is Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And the other thing is Jesus Christ is our standard. If you're a believer, and we can't expect to experience blessing without suffering if we are image bearers like Jesus Christ. So you can't have the good without the bad. And it's just inevitable. You need to get ready for it because it's going to happen.
So true.
But the scripture arsenal works beautifully all the time. And you just have to remind yourself of that. And the other thing is if we are believers, when we say we are going to be obedient, that means we're telling God we love him. And if you choose to do, not do what he says and be disobedient, you're telling him you don't love him. I don't want God to think I don't love him because I want the blessings, but I know that I also have to share in the sufferings. But yeah, it's just that arsenal of scripture that keeps me going.
Great.
Yeah. And I asked that question because I think, I've been engaging more in the social justice aspect of even what that looks like in the workplace, right? What does social justice look like in the workplace? How do we show up? And there normally is this conflict between the ideas, and we've seen it, like social justice in the Black church. Like, how do we reconcile these ideas around social justice, right? And our Blackness along with our spirituality. So I thank you all for sharing. I don't like to ask questions about people's faith, but I thank you all for graciously kind of sharing your viewpoint on that. And so as we think about, right, a lot of these things that we've talked about, how they've existed in the workspace, and we've talked about some of the empowerment existed once we left or walked away from or reframed that space. Let's talk about ever having felt empowered in white spaces. Have there been moments where either through an ally, either through something that you actually were able to just kind of bear up and have that moment? But if we can talk or share a little bit about empowerment in white spaces. In thinking about this, right, and I'm definitely opening it up, but in thinking about this, I remember a moment where, and it was as I was exiting, so I already plotted my exit strategy. I was putting in my couple last little things on my plan. And I remember my first moment was actually I started engaging on my LinkedIn differently, because those of us that have been in corporate know we exist on LinkedIn just kind of as our resume on LinkedIn. We may comment here and there, but you're really not really giving your opinion on a lot of things because of how it can impact. And I know even after I exited, there was a moment of how active am I on LinkedIn? Will future employers not look at me? Will companies not want me? So I went through that moment, but I remembered someone actually said to me at work, it was a non-person of color. I'm at work, and she said to me, "You look so much more interesting on LinkedIn." And I guess how I was showing up at work, kind of bland. I wore my black or my non-colors, kind of kept my head down and navigated because I was exiting, right? Like I was just getting out of here. But when she said that, I thought about it from two perspectives. And one was that I thought she should have framed the comment differently to ask me, right, in the HR space, why didn't I feel comfortable enough to be as colorful at work? Like, I think that would have been important for her to kind of own that. But I also felt like I was out of the closet proverbially, like people knew that I was this person that had this personality, and I was kind of allowing it to happen. And so when she said it, I said, "I probably am," right? And we laughed, and I kind of walked away. But in that moment, I remembered feeling empowered, not because anybody gave it to me, but because I didn't apologize, right? I didn't double back. I didn't rethink it. I didn't go back to try to delete anything that I had written. Like, I owned that I definitely am. I'm bomb, right? Outside of when I come here, right? And I own that moment. And so in thinking through, now that's my empowerment story, right? Some people's stories may be a little very much different, but do you mind sharing that moment of empowerment, right? As it happened for you, even within the white space?
Wow.
I'll share. I am a lawyer, and so I was working in a government agency, and we had a lecture series that our division would put on every year. And all of my executives were white. I was the only person in our C-suite. And I had this idea about, let's do something on diversity and inclusion. If anybody in our agency is going to do anything, it's going to be our division. And they were like, okay, fine. They went with it, but they didn't participate, didn't contribute, didn't add anything to it. And when they agreed to it, I was like, it's on. And what happened was, we had the first all Black panel at I won't say the agency, but first all Black panel at this agency with our chief counsel's office with a white champion as the moderator. My bosses were floored. They had no idea what was going to happen, but they knew it was going to be good because I was in charge. And they couldn't stop raving about it. I mean, people are still talking about this today, and this was 4 years ago, and I'm not even there anymore. So that was my moment of empowerment, because I'm going to tell you, there was no forward movement after that. And within a year, I was gone. But that was my moment where I was like, you can do this. This is not the end for you. There is something better, and we're going to go find it. But yeah, that was my moment of empowerment. Although I would say some of my executives were my champions, they still were not, I want to say, advocating for me.
Right.
I would say
And on that panel, you was bomb too. Right? You got to show up bomb on that panel as well. I'm in law school at night, so I'm going to be bothering you, Heather, about that journey. Savannah, you were going to share?
Yeah, I would say that like I have multiple moments of empowerment. And I think for me, like there's a lot of times when I'm like the only, young person or the only Black person on a panel. In the summer I was actually on a panel. I was only girl there who, and I was like, young Black girl, I was 17. And it felt really good just to see like I earned my spot here. Like they asked me to speak along with all these other officials and Congress people or mayors, and it's really like empowering for me to be like, I'm here and I have a really strong voice and something to say. And that happens to me, pretty often whenever I am asked to speak somewhere, because I think it's nice to see that I am young, I am a Black woman, and it's really nice to see, see that I'm doing something that I care so much about. And so, yeah, that's how I feel empowered.
Mary,
I like to say, empowered in white spaces. That's been most of my life. I shadowed my dad, who was a community activist. That man and the other men of Mount Hermon, there's even a little legend out there about them. But they were always in great spaces of influence. And they did something magnificent, like go to Richmond and got millions of dollars to rebuild our community. And that was powerful. And I just would volunteer as I got older and take leadership roles at some of the meetings. And then finally, when my job was ending, all that community work, all the other things I was doing outside of that job saved me and took me to another level, because when the plant shut down, I was already working with the community, hosting festivals, being in charge of the business association, community leaders, the mayor, city council. These were regular people that would come to our meeting. And then joining the chamber, I was always there looking out for my community. My little girls in the community, didn't matter if there was a program that they could benefit from, I was there speaking up for my community. And those great leaders of my community, most of them, in fact, every one of them have gone home to be with the Lord. And I took a responsibility to carry on that leadership voice and became very creative. And that moment of empowerment gave me the freedom to create online events for the candidates for the city, because I had a comfortable sense of self, a right to be in that space. I have leadership and creativity. Let me do this for you. And they came, they wrote their checks, and the candidate that I have became mayor. And I was just so proud of creating a project and being so comfortable with people in leadership. And that's what I want to do for every woman of color, every woman I can touch, and every child that I can inspire.
Great, Rachel.
Sorry about that, having
Sure.
issues there. I agree with Mary. It's important to establish yourself outside of your company, to be involved with industry partners and committees and think tanks, because what I have found is that whenever the industry begins to call on you, your company that you're working for begins to see your value, right? And sometimes where they don't see the value whenever you're just kind of churning the day to day. But it's important that you try to stay connected and make a name for yourself within your field outside of your primary job. I think is very important. And whenever industry partners begin to call on you for advice, you really begin to appreciate that your experiences aren't for naught. They're just not for you, but you can help others in their line of work as well. So that is very empowering for me when just having industry partners who are very interested in your experiences and what you have done and want to learn from you.
And I think that point is really, really, really important, especially because oftentimes we do treat the workplace like the only place we can be relevant, right? Like we make it the entire fishbowl, right? And we treat ourselves as if the only way we can use our gifts or use our skills or use our relevance is in the workplace. And so I've noticed even when I was still working, those moments of volunteering or working on an outside project or doing something, right, that my boss didn't have to give me permission to do, right, because I was using my own time or kind of engaging, those were empowering moments. I do want to sneak this question in. I just want to say, like, as we've talked about, like, what it is for us to thrive and how we survive, and even feeling empowered in white spaces, does anyone want to share, and I can share after everyone else, but about a moment where we may have been complicit, right, in allowing other people not to feel comfortable in their authenticity, right, in their Blackness? Have we always been kind and inviting to Black women? Have we ever had moments where we've allowed another person to be mistreated because we didn't want to be, or allow things to happen around us because we didn't want to rock the boat? Does anyone want to share about a moment or have a moment that they can speak to? Because we all don't have one, right? So they have a moment where in self-reflection, you realize, you know what, I was a little bit complicit in allowing this or allowing another person to be impacted by this.
I can say I don't have one of those moments.
And I'll unpack a little. I guess I can say from my experience sitting in the HR space, there have been moments. I remember when I was staffing my first team, and there were candidates coming in, and I think I remember saying to myself that I could not. I think I had made this barrier in my mind that said I could not have an entire Black department. Right, that I could not have a department that did not have an appropriate mixture of everybody else, right? Because I had to make sure that I wasn't overly centering people of color, right? Or Black people or Black women or anything like that. And so while I was clear about the fact that I wasn't going to hire people just because they were Black women, like I wasn't going to look through resumes and say these names sound like the names of Black women, let me gather them. I did have to come to a moment where I had to retrain myself to not turn away candidates for fear of people would think I was trying to stack the deck with people that look like me, and embrace that there were people who applied for the role because they clicked on my name and saw me and thought that they had a better chance potentially of getting it because my face was there. So I had to, and Dr. Sharita wants to respond to this too, so I'm going to pivot to her after this. But I had to own that, like, even in spaces where I was empowered, closing my mind off to the idea that I didn't want anybody to assume that I was trying to do da-da-da, and being able to open that door wider and make different decisions because they were the right decisions, and not in fear of what other people would think of me, because there were plenty of all-white departments, and I'm pretty sure they were not worried about what I thought about their all-white departments. They were not losing sleep. They were not making different decisions. So that was one of the things for me. And I know Dr. Weatherspoon wanted to share something as well.
Yes. So I can say that I have not been complicit, at least not knowingly complicit in that. But what helped to direct how I did lead was my experience with previous Black women supervisors and managers.
Yes.
In my experience, they were actually like my worst work experiences. And it wasn't really because of, they didn't want to give another Black woman special treatment. It was more like, I see you as a threat. You're my competition, and I can't let you get ahead. I can't let you shine. In some cases, it was, oh, I want to be your mentor. But then every time I'm trying to get mentoring, I noticed that you're trying to keep me in a box. So that actually, made me, once I stepped into leadership, like, I will not be that Black woman. I will not be that Black woman. So it's much more intentional about, coaching Black women under my leadership. I did not necessarily make things easier for them. Like, my expectations were not any lower for them than they were for any other employee. But I recognized, because I had been through some things, what they were also facing, and did my best, to use coaching moments to help, build them up, get them to address growth areas for themselves and things like that. But I, like, my best managers have actually been Black men. Yeah. And not, any kind of crazy nonsense or whatever, but those have been the professional relationships that have been most supportive, or at least just kind of even killed. Like, ain't no funny business, no treating me bad, no talking to me like, like they don't respect me or anything like that. So that, I think it goes back to the whole kind of sisterhood thing and how we care for each other, simply because of the Black woman experience, and, our ability to be able to help each other and not see each other as competition,
Right.
or, someone who, like, we can't all make it together, but we absolutely can.
Yeah. And I think, in navigating even conversations like this, right? Like, I'm excited actually to be amongst a group of women who kind of owned it, and have owned it in their own individual ways, but are very clear and comfortable about talking about it. The norm, right? When we start looking at, like, even stats around what it is to be a Black woman, and even how we look at, and I look at employment stats often, and a lot of times they'll show, like, research indicates when people get to a resume and they can tell that it is a person of color, even people of color, right, will kind of judge it a little bit more harshly. Like, it's just something, I don't know that it's intentional, and I'm not saying that everyone does it, but I think there's this idea around that if that person's failure also becomes a tally mark against us personally. So I've seen managers say, I brought this person in and I'm trying to give them a chance. And as if anything that this person does that doesn't meet the standard is also a negative hit against them because they opened the door. And I think one thing about the Black experience that I've seen, and I think it plays out in these spaces, is a white person can do something and it'll be that the white person did something. Black people have a tendency of feeling like we carry the entire reputation of the Black culture on our backs when we make a decision. And so it becomes we become, and we can become at times, rougher on each other, not because we're trying to be roadblocks all the time, and not because we're always trying to keep each other out, but because we're counting every decision. I know when I watch the news and they start describing something that happened, I'm like, please don't let it, you're literally like, I'm sorry that it happened, but more so, please don't let this be a person of color. And so, as we wrap up and come on our time, I do want to say that I am privileged to have sat and listened to each of you share your stories. I'm so excited about Savannah having found her way at 15, right, and navigating the space empowerment, to hear Mary's story about looking at and being able to take the environment that she was in that could have quieted her and like shrank her down, and how she used it to really bloom and grow. Heather, being courageous, centering Black folks in a space where it's like, give me an in, I'm gonna center my people, and then transitioning that into a way of empowering women not to have to hide, right, and carry those things. And then Rochelle showing us and talking to us really about how to own it and be empowered in the space, how to have those two parts of ourselves, right, where we can kind of go back to our families and our friends, how to have those places where we get to be the expert, even if not allowed in the corporate space, but to own ourselves, right, outside of the corporate spaces, we get, right, those moments of empowerment. So I appreciate you ladies sharing your amazing stories and your amazing vantage points. And I thank you again, Dr. Weatherspoon, for allowing me to sit with this group of amazing women and share a little bit of my story as well.
Yes, thank you, Joy, and thank you, ladies. Another powerful conversation. We had quite a few comments come in on the chat on Zoom about how our viewers are able to resonate with some of your experiences, and really having kind of emotional responses to what some of you were saying. Just a couple of these comments. Janice says, Rochelle, about what you were talking about, reflecting in the moment and also realizing that you gained the victory in it through the hands of the Lord. And let's see, pulling out from, I think, Joy, you made this comment talking about I think Mary started it out talking about doing the work in the community, and that kind of being her saving grace when things didn't work out with the job, and just, being able to develop an identity outside of what you do in the workplace, that you can have a presence, impact in other areas of your life. And that also, helps to balance out some of the negative things that might happen in the workplace, so it doesn't to defeat you and destroy you. Let's see if Facebook gonna cooperate with me. Yes, so Ashley said, preach. Joy, I think you were talking at that time. Amy says, you are also inspiring. Let's see. There were a couple of questions. A statement about don't we put on our armor when we encounter people who try to marginalize us? And that is so true. But what we have to recognize is that once we put on that armor serves as a barrier, not only against those who you feel are coming at you, but it prevents people from actually getting closer to you and understanding you better. So, it's like, in a way, we have to be willing to be a bit vulnerable so that we can hopefully change people's minds and perceptions, so that they can see us for who we are as people versus just as, kind of this stereotypical Black woman. Let's see, other comments about, just you all talking good, ladies. So that is really, really good. We have about 40 different comments on here. Yes, Deneen mentioned your coaching and growth and leadership. The strength and power of this group of women is really empowering and inspiring. So that's to you all. That's to you all. So I want to thank you for, letting your spirits and your personality shine forth in our time together, in our conversations, and for your authenticity in sharing about your experiences this evening.